Hello and welcome to week 3 here in Social Psych. Sorry, a little late this time in terms of getting the material out, but we have chapters 4 and 5 that we are going to be covering this week. Chapter 4 is in conducting research in the real world, and chapter 5 is social neuroscience, which is an application of brain imaging for an even deeper understanding of the social nature of our behavior. So let's take a look at the course book itself. We have conducting psychological research in the real world. Little cartoon here I pulled from my sociology class. So is the sociology department, always looking out onto the quad at the college, figuring out how people behave. Certainly as a psychologist, one of my favorite activities has been simply casually observing people in the mall or shopping or at a park or anything like that, and just kind of taking it in. Very relaxing way of doing the kind of work that I like to do. So we go here through, understanding the challenges of doing psychological research in the real world, because experiments classically are where we try to control all the variables, but the more we control the variables, the more unlike the real world it becomes. So we always have to strike a balance of how much do I want to control in order to really understand the phenomenon that I'm studying, and how much of that will actually be applicable, because those circumstances never really happen in the real world. So psychologists are constantly balancing that. So in social psychology, especially when you're looking at the totality of influences on our social behavior, it makes for some very interesting challenges when we're studying daily life and whatnot. So the kind of experience that I'm going to have you sort of look at here, we look into the, further into the course book about studying online behavior, and taking this opportunity to tell you a little bit about what I know about how technology impacts us. And I go through a number of different factors that have been part of my own work in understanding what you're going through right now, what many people are going through, making the transition into online learning when you would prefer to be in a face-to-face classroom. Now, the dissertation study that I did for my doctorate actually looked at the social nature of online learning and how computer-mediated technology created what we call transactional distance. It created a distance between you and I. You're watching this video. I'm not there. I recorded this before. We're not in the room at the same time. It changes the way in which we interact. And in the course book, I go through a number of different factors associated with computer-mediated communication, online teaching and learning, and both the pros and cons. So transactional distance, that we don't have to be in the same time and place, means that there's that delay or that sense of disconnect, but it's also the opportunity that we don't necessarily have to be on the same schedule, and we can still benefit from each other's presence. The social norms change in terms of what is okay and what is not okay. We have to actually define those in a new environment, such as online learning. You actually sort of have to delineate that. And in my courses, I have a document that I put on there, social etiquette, inside of an online class. We have to kind of delineate that. If nobody's ever been in that environment, it's like a culture shock. What do I do? What do I say? Then there's the quality inequality. There's equality in terms of the quality of technology that somebody has, new technology versus old technology, and the fact that that creates an inequality. I'm doing this video, and yet it's of an understanding that some of you might have a difficult time even accessing this video because you have slower internet access. And we have to realize that there is that inequality, and this pandemic has certainly shone the light on that issue. So it's very, very, that divide between those who do have modern technology and fast internet access and those who do not. There's a culture of reading and writing that becomes very important. Multimedia, in fact, lessens the content. You get much more out of reading and writing than you actually get out of watching a movie. I know it sounds kind of weird. We do movies because they're engaging. But the hope is that we show movies and we show PowerPoints and we show images and whatnot to entice learners to engage in the depth reading associated with learning a topic. And so the fact is, when you're in online learning or online teaching situation, you have to be a fairly good reader and a fairly good writer. Sort of part of what it's all about. In addition to that social transactional distance, what we see is this delayed immediacy is another factor, that there's a delay between your responses and my responses, my grade, your performance and my grading. You know, there's that delay. You have a question. If you're in class, you raise your hand, I call on you, you get the answer right away. In an online class, it's not the same thing. You can post a question and wait. Sometimes wait a long time before you get the answer to that question. The other factor is distraction. That when you're doing an online class or when you're working at home now, you know, all those chores, the kids, the spouse, the activities that are normally associated with home are right there, and it's hard sometimes to stay focused on work. And our technology itself, our efforts to multitask. We have our email going, we have Facebook going, we're watching a video, we're taking a quiz, we're doing all of these things at the same time. And yet, as efficient as that might make us feel, it also has an impact on the quality of our work and our productivity. There's the issue of global communication now, that we have connection to people all over the world. This is great sometimes because we can look at videos of great speakers who are way better at social psychology than me, and we can take that information in and share that. There's issues of privacy, where people are both more likely to share personal information in an online class than they are in a face-to-face class. And yet there's that increased risk that you're making this information public to individuals that you may not know as well. And finally, engagement, in terms of, because of the lack of social presence of other people physically there, kind of managing your behavior, kind of what we're all talking about. When you're in a classroom, you're sort of under the rules. You're not under that when you're in an online class, and those distractions and the family and all of that start to come into play. So each one of these starts to have an impact on how we experience this new world of social learning. So in the discussion, I'm having you contemplate and think about, in the chapter 4 discussion, I want you to think about transactional distance, the new social norms, inequality, the quality of stuff, the reading and writing emphasis. Each one of these things, you don't have to do all of them, but pick some and just have a discussion about how this has changed the way you're learning and changed your work, changed your life and whatnot. And then in the quiz, we're going to get into some of that stuff that's from the textbook primarily about, what are the advantages of conducting research in the real world, even though there's all these factors that get in the way. And then for the second question, I want you to do some investigation on the social norms associated with a social media platform of your choice, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is. You look up the rules and have a show me where those rules are, give me a link to that, and talk about how that social media platform lays the groundwork for how people are going to interact with each other, because there's nobody there when somebody has to say the ground rules for people to engage in that social media platform. So the next chapter that we have here, I'm going to go to it, is chapter 5, where we're going to be looking at social neuroscience. And essentially that's applying all the new technology that we have about brain imaging, functional magnetic resonance imaging, these things that we have, and then applying that to a deeper understanding of social psych. And where we see this, what I focused on here, is the notion of prejudice and categorization. When we encounter somebody, our brain operates on some very, very fast programs, such as when we meet somebody, we begin to categorize them. That is a natural function and it's a survival function. This is very good. We have to be able to act quickly, and we take these shortcuts. The problem can sometimes be that we can shortcut someone into a group of people of which we have prejudices about, or we have stereotypes associated with that individual, and it's automatic, and our behavior starts to exhibit that. So sometimes we're aware of that, as we've had a discussion in terms of like understanding behaviors that we're not aware of, or we're just kind of unwilling to admit them. And we use neuroimaging now, and when we can observe people engaging in these shortcuts, these cognitive shortcuts, we can actually track them in the brain and see what parts of the brain are being activated and raise awareness of that particular issue. And then the other topic and this kind of goes along with the two discussions that we have for this chapter. The other topic has to do with social stress. And what can we say? We have personal stress. We have events in our lives. We have births, deaths, marriages, vacations, all the, stress and eustress, which is like positive things that are happening, but they're still stressful. And now, probably more than any time in my life at least, there is these social factors that are going on. We can just list them. We have COVID going on. We're in the middle of a presidential election cycle. We have the BLM movement that are going on. We have the fires that are going on out west. We have economic ups and downs, personal economic impact and all this. We have to switch to online learning. All these factors largely out of our control. And we have to thrive. We have to attempt to survive and live and move forward and find new ways to do things. And so I'm asking you actually to share how all this is impacting you. What is your stress level? Not who you think should be president. That's not the question. The question is, how are we dealing with this? How well are you doing? And what can we do? The major tools that we have when something's out of our control. Certainly we want to impact when things are in our control and reduce stress. But in order to manage stress, because life is full of these kinds of things, we often turn to physical activity and social supports. Both of those are being impacted by the rules of social distancing. That gym that you went to, or that walk that you used to take down in the park, not quite the thing that you want to do. And because of social distancing, we might not be meeting with our friends. We might not be having those get-togethers. Our families might not be physically getting together. So those tools that we have for dealing with social stress are not as available. So therefore, it's like a double whammy there. We have all these personal stresses that are always going on. We have all these social stresses, and two of the major areas that we have for helping ourselves with that are not as accessible. So what's your plan? I'm asking, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what we're doing to survive and thrive through this challenging time. So kind of a challenging week here. We have 2 chapters. There are total of 3 discussions, chapter 4 discussion, and 2 discussions for chapter 5, and then a quiz in chapter 4. So get going, and I'll see you in the discussion boards.